the Pagan Book of Days, which is a great read, brothers and sisters. What you would need to do is make sure you get this book titled by author Nigel Pinnock. Okay. Now, he actually goes into the ancient Roman calendar to show you all the sacrifices and rituals that were going on under Rome. Now, Rome, Christ died or was killed under a Roman capital punishment. They're responsible for Christ's death, the Romans, right? Now we are worshiping Roman and pagan days. And I'm going to go into this book in a moment. Reputable history sources went to, you can actually go to the History Channel online and deal with the sources and cut and paste what you need to deal with certain topics. And it has the references and all that there. But I copied and pasted some of it. Ancient origins of Halloween, right? Should Bible believers have their children follow Halloween or paganism or Canaanite ceremonies? Right? I need you to read this for me, Elder Lawya. Ancient origins of Halloween.
Yes, sir. Halloween's origins date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. The Celts, who lived 2,000 years ago in the area that is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated their new year on November 1st. This day marked the end of summer and the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of year that was often associated with human death.
Human death. Okay. Children are sacrificed on this day. Go on.
Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred.
And the what?
That the worlds between the living and the dead became blurred.
Became blurred. They do seances and all that leading into this day. Bonfires, they kill babies and all that in the fire to Adrimelech, which is in the scripture. Man, Christ was totally against all of it. Read.
On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghost of the dead returned to the earth.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, like the master, seminary pastor said, it's nothing that says that, you can't dress up a child and get candy. Right? But shouldn't you tell them, well, this is really the origin of it, though. And you can make a conscious choice of exercising your liberty after knowing what it is. You got the liberty to worship on a day that children are being killed and witches and warlocks are doing rituals, to the dead for entry into, your space. All right, go on.
In addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, Celts thought that the presence of the otherworldly spirits made it easier for the Druids.
Now, it says damaging crops because they would vandalize on purpose in the ancient days. Now, when I was growing up, hey, I'll take listen, I was 10 years old. Like, listen, I'll take 3 dozen of eggs. Okay.
Yep, eggs, toilet paper.
They knew exactly when I went in there, they knew how many eggs we going to scramble. Here it is. I'm dressed up. I'm black paint on me. I'm a little kid. Now, my mom, born again Christian. I know I grew up. I'm sitting there with a whole bag full of raw eggs. And I'm like, you know what? This ain't good enough. I had to get it a few days beforehand and find a way to make sure they get rotten. So you get them hot and rotten so that you can throw rotten eggs. And damage buses and all that. I grew up doing that. Because they was like, yo. I'm like, what we doing this day, man? We going to bomb people with eggs. You wonder where that came from. That was an ancient Celtic ritual, brothers and sisters.
It says here, in addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, Celts thought that the presence of otherworldly spirits made it easier for Druids or Celtic priests to make predictions about the future.
Come on. Hold up. Divination. Go on.
For a people entirely dependent on the volatile natural world, These prophecies were an important source of comfort and direction during the long, dark winter. To commemorate the event, Druids built huge sacred bonfires.
They built what?
Huge sacred bonfires.
Huge sacred bonfires. These are sorcerers and witches. They all have sacrificed children, who you see here. And that's what they do in the UK. They call it Bonfire Night or Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th. Right? Because the ritual really goes from, the whole celebration is from October 31st to November 6th in Celtic, under Celtic pagan tradition. You know what she said? She's like, I hated Christians. You stole everything. We were the original pagans. Well, why no one told the Christians that? You've been deceived. And a lot of you Christians will renounce the Bible, believing that those teachings came from the Bible. You've been lied to from Roman authority. Right? Check this out, Celts. Read.
To commemorate the event, Druids built huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices.
Now that they burning animals, and pagans really honor animals over people, what do you think are happening to the babies? Read.
Where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. During the celebration,
the
Celts wore costumes.
Costumes, see? Are you following me here? That's why your children put on costumes as a Celtic ritual. You are a part of the ritual when you do this. That's what your Christian pastor is supposed to show you. Not tell you you have liberty. Because in the world today, we do it a little different in the world today, as if God changed. Read.
During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes, typically consisting of animal heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires, where they had extinguished earlier that evening, from the sacred bonfire to help protect them from during the coming winter.
Now, let's see something here. Now, let's jump up into the Catholic Church now, right? This happened in 609 AD now, right? In 609 AD, check out what they did with this at the same time of year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, let's go to 43 AD, right before them, right? The first was Ferelia.
Okay. By 43 AD, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of the Celtic territory. In the course of the 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, two festivals of Roman origin were combined with traditional Celtic celebration of Samhain. The first was Ferelia, a day in late October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead.
The passing of the dead, same thing.
The second was a day to honor Pomona, the goddess of fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple, and the incorporation of this celebration into Samhain probably explains the tradition of bobbing for apples that is practiced today on Halloween.
Oh, bobbing for apples, the game? Look at that. Because this Christian, who have now been told and excused by the authority to allow their children to dress up and go get candy, that same child will also participate in these Celtic games. I grew up bobbing for animals, blindfolded, pin the the tail on the donkey, telling them what's that about. But these are not innocent games. There's some evil satanic connotation behind all of these rituals. Read.
All Saints' Day. On May 13th, 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV.
Now, this was after Christianity had been hijacked by the same people who destroyed and killed the prophets, teachers, and disciples. Right? Romans. Read.
Dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all Christian martyrs. And the Catholic feast of All Martyrs' Day was established in the Western Church. Pope Gregory III later expanded the festival to include all saints as well as all martyrs.
Just made it up.
Mm.
So that now people in the church could honor the dead and celebrate the Celtic Halloween or Samhain at the same time. Okay, we're celebrating the dead. Why don't we just tell them it's the martyrdom of old saints? They're dead people. Then we can celebrate it in the church too. Now, this was made up. The Bible didn't tell these Satanists to do none of this. The Bible have nothing to do with man's traditions. A matter of fact, the Bible calls out these deeds as evil. Right? Read.
And moved the observance from May 13th to November 1st. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread into Celtic lands, where it gradually blended and supplanted the older Celtic rites. In 1000 AD, the church would make November 2nd All Souls Day.
Now, that's not in the Bible. What's that? This is Canaanite paganism. Now, in full authority over the church. Christ and Christ's followers really have nothing to do with this. This is Satan appearing as an angel of light, now using Christ's name as a vehicle to spread his evil. Read.
A day to honor the dead. It's widely believed that today the church was attempting to replace the Celtic festival of the dead with a related church-sanctioned holiday. All Souls Day was celebrated similarly to Samhain, with big bonfires, parades, and dressing up in costumes as saints, angels, and devils. The All Saints Day celebration was also called All Hallows or All Hallowmass, from the Middle English, All Hallowmas, meaning All Saints Day.
And it should just say mess there. It says a hollow mess. No, a mess. A hot, steaming mess. Read, should be interpreted in English. Go on.
And the night before it, the traditional night of Samhain in the Celtic religion began to be called All Hallows Eve and eventually Halloween.
Right? What else you have, Elder Lawya? Halloween comes to America. Let's go there. Now it's right here. Halloween comes to America. That's it. Yeah, it's right here.
Halloween comes to America.
Read.
Celebration of Halloween was extremely limited in colonial New England because of the rigid Protestant belief systems there. Halloween was much more common in Maryland and the southern colonies. As the beliefs and customs of different European ethnic groups, as well as the American Indians meshed, a distinctly American version of Halloween began to emerge. The first celebrations included play parties, public events held to celebrate the harvest, where neighbors would share stories of the dead, tell each other's fortunes, dance, and sing. Colonial Halloween festivities also featured the telling of ghost stories and mischief-making of all kinds. By the middle of the 19th century, annual autumn festivities were common, but Halloween was not yet celebrated everywhere in the country. In the second half of the 19th century, America was flooded with new immigrants. These new immigrants, especially the millions of Irish fleeing the Irish potato famine, helped to popularize the celebration of Halloween nationally. Trick or treat.
Trick or treat.
Borrowing from the Irish and English traditions,
Pagans.
Americans began to dress up in costumes and go house to house asking for food and money, a practice that eventually became today's trick or treat tradition. Young women believed that on Halloween they could divine the name or appearance of their future husband by doing tricks with yam or yarn, apple parings, or mirrors. In the late 1800s, there was a move in America to mold Halloween into a holiday more about community and neighborly get-togethers than about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. At the turn of the century, Halloween parties for both children and adults became the most common way to celebrate the day. Parties focused on games, foods of the season, and festive customs.
And festive costumes.
Costumes.
Go on.
Costumes. It says here, citizens would beg for food. Parents were encouraged by newspapers and community leaders to take anything frightening or grotesque out of Halloween celebrations. Because of these efforts, Halloween lost most of its superstitious and religious overtones by the beginning of the 20th century.
Okay.
Halloween parties. By the 1920s and 30s, Halloween had become a secular but community-centered holiday, with parades and town-wide Halloween parties as the featured entertainment. Despite the best efforts of many schools and communities, vandalism began to plague some celebrations in many communities during this time.
Go on.
By the 1950s, town leaders had successfully limited vandalism, and Halloween had evolved into a holiday directed mainly at the young. Due to high numbers of young children during the 50s baby boom, parties moved from town civic centers into classroom or home where they could be more easily accommodated. Between 1920 and 1950, the centuries-old prank of trick-or-treating was also revived. Trick-or-treating was a relatively inexpensive way for an entire community to share the Halloween celebration. In theory, families could also prevent tricks being played on them by providing the neighborhood children with small treats. Thus, a new American tradition was born, and it has continued to grow today. Americans spend an estimated $6 billion annually on Halloween.
How much?
$6 billion annually on Halloween.
They pay to worship Satan. Check it out. Go on.
Making it the country's second largest commercial holiday after Christmas. The pastor who said that you should use liberty when it comes to Halloween.
Yeah, use liberty with Halloween, right?
It tells us here in the book of 1 Peter chapter 2, 15 through 16. For so is the will of God, that with well-doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness.
See that? Using what?
Not using your liberty.
Not using your liberty.
For a cloak of maliciousness.
For a cloak of maliciousness. What's more malicious than Halloween and the rituals that are being practiced the same day you're trick-or-treating? You can't use liberty for that. Read.
But as the servants of God.
See? You must use your liberty to promote Christ. What union does light have with darkness? See? There is no union. There is no liberty or excuse to have if you believe in the Bible. Now, these Satanists, hey, Christ said what? Be hot or cold. At least they have decided a path to hell and are living it. Okay, Satanists and pagans and those that worship the ancient pagan Canaanite holy days, hey, that's their choice. But we, believers in the Bible, are supposed to stand on the Bible. See? Let's get a few more scriptures. Let's deal with a witch real quick, according to the Bible.
This is Deuteronomy 18:9. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations.
Read.
There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times.
Who use what?
Or that useth divination.
Divination is what that witch said she was using. These things are practiced at its height during this time of year, leading up to and beyond Halloween. Divination, which is connection and divining with spirits. Read.
Or an observer of times.
Read.
Or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer.
These are all priests and priestesses under what? Under paganism. Okay. Read.
And notice it said necromancy, which
necromancer.
is communicating with the dead.
Communicating with the dead, which they do predominantly on this particular day. And this is what they believe at this time of year. Hell opens a doorway for the dead. And what they do is they connect with these spirits to gain power, technology, and understanding over the masses. Leviticus 19, and let's start at 26th. 19 and 26, one down, yes.
Leviticus 19 and 26. Ye shall not eat anything with blood, neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times. Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard.
When it says marring the corners of thy beard and making things with the corner of your head, it's speaking of ritualistic cuttings. Okay? It's not speaking of haircuts. You have so many people out there talking about haircuts. No, it's not. It's talking about what you would see, what the indigenous people used to do. Okay, like the Incans and Mayans, when they have these ritualistic hair cuttings to the gods. That's what that's speaking of. Read.
28. Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you.
See that?
I am the Most High.
I am the Most High. These printed marks was to what? To the dead. It was a Canaanite ritual. People would mar their hair to the dead. Okay? On top of marring their head and doing to look like a god, they would mar their heads. On top of that, they would make a printing to the dead. Like a lot of us today, we'll print someone's name on us that died to remember that person. That's a ritual to the dead. All this is encompassed in what? Canaanite rituals and worships. Hence, the origin of Halloween. Come to the truth. Stand on the Bible. Stand on the principles of the Bible. And I would say the first step for Christians out there who may run into these videos, your first step, I would say the first step is to do what? First, denounce all holidays altogether. Okay? Just denounce them all together and begin with the holy days written of in the Bible. At least you understand you can actually substantiate and confirm those days. Don't relate those days to Jewish people. Jewish people are not following those days correctly. Okay, don't relate it to that. Relate it to the God who made the moon, stars, and all that. These are his holy days. Now, if you want to know what days to actually follow or what day of the year to follow these holy days, well, what we have done as the Gathering of Christ Church, we have actually put a calendar based on the correct 364-day cycle on the website. You can go to gatheringofchrist.org to the website, look at the calendar, and know exactly when the heavens observe those days.